The potential big bad in Stranger Than Heaven isn't going to be the Oath brother Yu Shinjo, nor will it be Orpheus played by Snoop Dogg, but it's none other than SEGA and RGG Studio. For making us wait to hear the full song! Stranger Than Heaven is already breaking records left and right, and it's not even out yet. Its latest trailer is already amassing millions of views, granted that most of those numbers are from people who keep coming back to listen to this banger of a song. Seriously, SEGA, just release the full version already. But there's no denying that Stranger Than Heaven is looking to be RGG Studio's biggest game ever. Thus, it needs to do everything right. As Stranger Than Heaven can't really afford to fail, with RGG Studio's reputation taking hit recently due to remake controversies, retcons, delistings of old games, and inconsistent modernizations of their titles. Stranger Than Heaven is a way for RGG Studio to make right with the fans and establish themselves as one of the few developers left that players can still rely on. They wouldn't want to be the next Ubisoft who lost $1.4 billion. Furthermore, with all the new features that Stranger Than Heaven is exploring, it feels like this game is taking a bigger risk compared to other games by RGG Studio. This will also shoulder the weight of being a new intellectual property, and those tend to not perform as well as established IPs. But there have been surprises such as Capcom's Pragmata and even Sega's Metaphor, who sold millions of copies in its initial week. And most importantly, RGG Studio can now prove that they can create a game that doesn't rely on the legacy of Kiryu Kazuma. So here's everything Stranger Than Heaven needs to get right. But before that though, if you believe in Stranger Than Heaven's hype, then like this video and join Otaku the Find for more Yakuza content.
Stranger Than Heaven.
The first thing that Stranger Than Heaven absolutely needs to get right is to be its own game. The title should not feel like another Yakuza 0, but set in 1940s, or a Judgment-like game in the Taisho period. It also needs to avoid being a bait for another Kiryu story. From the prologue up to the ending, it should maintain its own identity as Stranger Than Heaven. Well, sure, we have mentions of the Tojo clan here and there, but that didn't stop the Judgment game from being a Judgment game. Thankfully, Stranger Than Heaven already set itself apart by making music the central theme of its story, so we can view RGG Studios games in this way. Like a Dragon titles are Yakuza games, then Judgment is for the detective noir thriller adventure, while Stranger Than Heaven is hanging out with Snoop Dogg to produce music. For Stranger Than Heaven to truly establish its own identity, it needs to avoid relying too heavily on appearances from legacy Yakuza characters as its main attraction. While Easter eggs are still acceptable, such as the appearance of a young Shinji and the pants-stealing Ryuji were executed perfectly in Yakuza 0. However, Stranger Than Heaven shouldn't make the same mistake as Ichiban's Like a Dragon duology, where the narrative focused too much on the older characters, thus affecting Ichiban's story development. These characters, while cool to see and they do bring a much-needed aura on the screen, should never be the focus. Just imagine if Yagami was saved by Kiryu. While it is an exciting fun service, it really doesn't push the plot forward, nor does it help Yagami's character. Which means that Stranger Than Heaven should follow Judgment's footsteps, where iconic characters from Yakuza were either mentioned for world building, or a very simple fan service without interrupting the flow of the main story. Thankfully, Yokoyama-san is already denying the appearances of certain characters, saying that Kiryu won't show up by the end of Daito's journey, and even the Daidoji faction won't make an appearance, which is good, because for Stranger Than Heaven to be awesome, it doesn't need the involvement of this faction. I mean, just know, even if it makes sense for them to appear given the time period, the game cannot be reduced to another plot twists and conspiracies, which has been the bread and butter of this faction just to insert themselves in the story. Stranger Than Heaven also needs to launch optimized and consumer-friendly. In all fairness to RGG Studio, their game almost always launches optimized and free of game-breaking bugs, which is a testament that this studio is reusing a lot of assets and has a good mastery with their engine. But my gosh, whoever is in charge of choosing these ugly filters needs to get their eyes checked. Not to mention that recent Yakuza games are plagued with these awful lightings. And I think Stranger Than Heaven also has this, as we can see on the trailer, or maybe that's just YouTube. They cannot launch Stranger Than Heaven in a similar way to Yakuza Kiwami 3 and Pirate Yakuza, where the lighting was so bad it was almost unplayable. Aside from that, SEGA shouldn't put any questionable microtransactions here. I mean, it's good to know that they've avoided their mistake of locking the New Game Plus mode behind a paywall, but just to be sure, Stranger Than Heaven should not lock any essential game features behind a DLC package. And please, stop the overuse of Ichiban as a pre-order bonus. We've seen this man travel to Edo, Japan, then escape prison to help Kiryu with his biker gang, and then set the high seas with Captain Majima. There are more creative ways in designing a good DLC or pre-order bonuses for Stranger Than Heaven. Who am I kidding? They're just gonna throw a Kiryu and Majima bonus as a performer in Daito's Jazz Clubs, which I will absolutely love. Anyway, Stranger Than Heaven needs to have a story that has real emotional consequences. Before I continue, this will of course spoil Yakuza and Judgment games, so just skip ahead. Yakuza stories work best when a sacrifice is given significance, such as when Rikiya saved Kiryu. He didn't just embody the spirit of his Arezumi, the Okinawan pit viper that protects its family to the death, he also left a lasting impact on Kiryu, pushing him to finally take responsibility for the Yakuza family had been trying to leave behind. Yakuza is at its best when that still matter. Even after everything Nishiki did in pursuit of his power, money, and influence, his demise still deeply resonates with both Kiryu and the fans. What makes it so impactful is that Nishiki wasn't just another villain, he was Kiryu's closest brother figure. His tragic downfall and final sacrifice became one of the emotional pillars of the entire series. Then Nishitani and Sagawa's demise fade the way for Majima's personality and the strength he needed to withstand the grueling Yakuza life. Stranger Than Heaven shouldn't have any fake-outs and retcons, because fans are so exhausted by the nobody stays dead storytelling. I mean, can you imagine if Daito loses Shinjo by the end? We, the players, are on the verge of tears, then the credits roll and he turns out to be fine. It's so cheap, and actually that's most of Kiryu's ending in Yakuza games. Speaking of Daito, as the main character, he needs to also have a strong internal conflict. The best RGG protagonists are compelling because they're emotionally torn, such as Kiryu running away from the Yakuza world to have a peaceful life, but he still owes a debt to the family that he left with a duty to protect them. Ichiban's positive outlook in life is constantly met with a harsh, cold reality, always thinking that a simple motivational speech is enough to rouse anyone to do the impossible, which has been both his weak and strong moments. Majima's desire for freedom, but it often leads to self-destruction, such as when he encourages Noah to pursue his desires but ends up getting hurt. Thankfully, Daito already has an interesting internal struggle given his origin as a half-Japanese, living in an era that hasn't fully accepted his type. It's one of the things I'm looking forward to, and by the trailer itself, it seems that RGG Studio isn't going to pull any punches to present a dire origin story for our protagonist. Lastly, since RGG Studio is going for a new combat system here, then Stranger Than Heaven must have a combat that is both responsive and satisfying. Upper criticisms of clunky remakes, inconsistent combat flows, and downgraded mechanics, RGG needs a combat system for Stranger Than Heaven that is fluid, weighty, aggressive, and mechanically rewarding. There have been debates in the community as to which engine is the best in regards to combat. Some prefer the impact of the Kiwami engine, where each punch and kick are almost felt by the player. Others love the Dragon engine simply for the flow of the movements and the physics, where the characters look strong in each strike. Thus, the sweet spot for a good combat system is somewhere between Yakuza 0's responsiveness and Lost Judgment's mobility and depth. Granted, Stranger Than Heaven has a different combat mechanic with the shoulder and trigger buttons controlling Daito's left and right movements, so it will be interesting to see how it would feel hands-on, so I hope that in the Summer Game Fest we have booths to try it, or maybe in the Tokyo Game Show. For now, RGG Studio needs to land everything on this list to finally establish themselves as one of the developers we players can rely on and be excited again for their future titles. And I'm going to say it right now, Stranger Than Heaven has the potential to be in the GOTY category if they manage to do everything right. But who knows? For now, we can keep replaying the trailer just for the song alone. If that doesn't get you hyped, then check every exciting thing we'll learn about Stranger Than Heaven in this video. Join Otaku Define for more Like a Dragon content. This is Math, and stay awesome, my Kyodais.